It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply.
At 75, King Charles wears not only the crown, but also a weight far heavier than jewels and gold could ever measure. For decades, he has carried a burden of secrets, truths hidden in shadows, whispers that never died. Inside the monarchy, silence has always been the armor. But silence also poisons, and those buried truths have clung to him like ghosts that refuse to fade. For years, one question echoed endlessly: would Prince Harry ever return to royal life? That question has finally been answered. King Charles has shut the door permanently. No return, no compromise. That decision sent shockwaves through the public, igniting new speculation. Yet it wasn't the decision itself that startled the world. It was what came after Charles has finally spoken, breaking decades of silence. Admitting to a truth so devastating, so unthinkable, that it could rewrite the very way the world looks at the crown. This is not just a matter of royal gossip. It is about the monarchy's future, about loyalty, about love, and about the truth that history tried to bury. So what was it? What truth had Charles guarded for half a lifetime? To understand, we must return to the shadow that has haunted him since the 1990s, the shadow of Diana. Even in death, Diana never left. Her tragic crash in Paris was supposed to be an ending, but instead, it became the beginning of something eternal. The princess who lived in the blinding glare of the world's cameras died fleeing them, and yet the chase never stopped. Her presence, her memory, became immortal. When asked once if she thought she would ever be queen, Diana smiled gently, and with piercing honesty said, "No, I want to be a queen of people's hearts." And that she became. Not a queen of marble palaces or ancient thrones, but a queen of millions of ordinary people across continents, across generations. Her warmth was unmatched. Her compassion was limitless. Her gift was rare. She made strangers feel noticed, valued, loved. People remembered her not just for her beauty, but for her humanity. A hand extended to an AIDS patient when others recoiled. A hug for a crying child who needed comfort more than ceremony. A quiet visit to the homeless when no cameras were meant to follow. These acts, small yet extraordinary, burned themselves into memory. Diana became more than royal. She became timeless, eternal. Each year, as August approached, Kensington Palace transformed. Outside its iron gates, flowers piled higher and higher. Candles flickered against the night air, their light trembling like fragile hope. Handwritten notes, some written in grief, some in gratitude, were pressed against the walls. People whispered her name as though it were a prayer. Even those who never met her carried her in their hearts. But grief, as the years passed, turned to something deeper: devotion. Diana became not just the princess of the past, but the eternal presence of the monarchy. And this was what haunted Charles the most. For the world, Diana was love and light. For Charles, she was a storm. Her memory pressed against him relentlessly. The press demanded he acknowledge her. The public cried out for him to honor her properly. Commentators and headlines repeated the same words. He owes Diana that much. And so, the pressure mounted. Even as Camilla brought him comfort and peace, Diana's shadow never loosened its grip. He lived two lives, one with his wife and one with the ghost of a woman who changed him forever, privately. Charles confessed to his most trusted friends, "It would be dishonest to pretend she didn't change me. She was the mother of my children. She shaped me in ways I can never deny." These words echoed in his mind again and again, especially when he watched William and Harry carry her torch into the future. But to speak publicly, to tell the truth, was another matter. He feared ridicule. He feared headlines twisted against him. He feared the anger of protesters and the judgment of history. And yet silence was worse. To stay silent was to let the wounds fester, to let Diana's story remain unfinished. To honor her, he would have to speak, and once spoken, there would be no going back. And so, the moment arrived. The memorial, unlike grand royal occasions, this was something different. No glittering carriages, no dazzling crowns. It was intimate, delicate, human. A celebration of Diana's influence through music, through words, through the simple power of memory. People came not as subjects, but as mourners, as admirers, as those touched forever by a woman who redefined royalty. For Charles, it was more than ceremony. It was the moment of reckoning. In the quiet weeks leading to it, he prepared. In his private study, he rehearsed over and over. Words failed him. Phrases felt too hollow. His voice cracked, his pauses stretched. If I stand there like a figure of stone, he told Camilla, I will lose them forever. Camilla said little. She knew this battle was his alone. On the day itself, the crowd was immense. Faces lined with grief, with reverence, with anticipation. Photos of Diana clutched in trembling hands. Flowers raised high, their petals trembling in the breeze. When Charles stepped onto the stage simple, stripped of pomp time seemed to still. The air was heavy with decades of emotion. He looked out across the crowd, his face carved by years of sorrow, duty, and silence. Then, finally, he spoke. There is something I have carried for far too long. It has lived in whispers, in shadows, but never on my lips. Perhaps now it is time I tell the truth. The crowd leaned forward, and then the confession. I never truly loved Diana, not as a husband should love his wife. I married her because it was expected, because tradition demanded it. I thought it was my duty to the crown, to my country, but in doing so, I caused pain-deep, unforgivable pain. To Diana, to our sons. To myself, the words hung in the air like thunder. Never before had a monarch admitted so much, so openly, Charles continued, his voice trembling. I was raised to believe the crown came before everything. But that belief had a cost, and that cost was my marriage. That cost was Diana's peace of mind. That cost was my humanity. For the first time, truth rang louder than ceremony. The crown had demanded silence, but Charles had broken it. Yet one question remained. Why? Why marry Diana at all, if his heart already belonged elsewhere? To find that answer, we must return to the glittering days of the early 1980s, when the world believed it was witnessing a fairy tale. Unaware of the cracks beneath the crown, the Morton tapes painted a haunting portrait of Diana not as the fairy tale princess the world adored, but as a young woman trapped between duty and despair. Her voice, recorded in secret, carried a truth too raw for official palace walls. They revealed the loneliness of endless palace corridors, the quiet betrayals that cut deeper than any sword, and the silent weight of sharing a marriage with a man whose heart was divided, while the world remembers her. 1995 Panorama interview. Those unforgettable words. There were 3 of us in this marriage. So it was a bit crowded. The seeds of revelation had already been sown in those earlier recordings. In them, Diana's suffering was not polished for television or crafted for headlines. It was raw, aching, unfiltered. She described the invisible chains of her role, the pressure of scrutiny, the constant flashing of cameras, the coldness of a palace that valued protocol over comfort. She spoke of the painful truth that her marriage, presented as destiny, was bound more by duty than by love. But in choosing to speak openly, vulnerably, Diana gave the world something far greater than scandal. She gave them humanity. No longer an untouchable figure dressed in tiaras and gowns, she became someone real. Someone whose heartbreaks and struggles could be felt by millions. Through those tapes, she invited the world into her soul. And what they found was not weakness, but courage. A young woman, battered by impossible pressures, yet determined to make her story heard. The tapes became a bridge between myth and reality, showing that behind the crowns and pageantry existed universal human emotions: love, longing, heartbreak, disappointment, tanned the quiet strength to endure them. For the public, Diana's voice was a revelation. For the monarchy, it was a warning, because once spoken, her truth could never be silenced again. But how much could she endure before tragedy struck? The night that changed everything. By the mid-1990s, The cracks in her marriage to Charles had widened into chasms. The glittering fajada of a perfect storybook union was crumbling for the entire world to see. The fairy tale that had once enchanted millions was unraveling, replaced by whispers of betrayal and images of a princess visibly suffering under the weight of royal duty. And then, August 31st, 1997, the unimaginable happened. News flashed across the globe. Diana, Princess of Wales, had been in a devastating car crash in Paris. Within hours, the fairy tale was shattered forever. The world froze. The news spread, faster than fire, igniting grief that spanned continents. Outside Kensington Palace, rivers of flowers and oceans of candles transformed the gates into a shrine of sorrow. People wept openly in the streets. Silence fell across cities. It was as though time itself stopped. Collective grief universal, indescribable, swept the world. But grief was not alone. Anger rose quickly. And at its center stood Charles. The public, already critical, now turned its fury toward him. Every decision, every word, every glance was scrutinized with brutal intensity. His long relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles became the focus of merciless headlines. The man who was destined to be king now seemed too many. The man who had broken Diana's heart, the monarchy itself, centuries old and wrapped in tradition, faced its most dangerous storm in modern history. For the first time in generations, the people looked past the pageantry and demanded something more: honesty, accountability, humanity. The sons who bore the weight amid the chaos, William and Harry, were left to grieve. Two boys, suddenly motherless, thrust into the harshest spotlight imaginable. Their grief was raw, magnified by the unblinking gaze of the world. They mourned not only their mother, but the chance at a happy family life that had been stolen from them long before Paris. The world mourned with them. Yet behind the tears was another story, one of young princes forced to walk behind their mother's coffin before billions of viewers. A moment of shared grief, but also a moment that exposed the brutal reality of royalty. Diana's death became more than a tragedy. It became a mirror reflecting the fragility of human life, the limits of duty, and the price of silence. She had lived with courage and died with her humanity shining brighter than her crown. Charles and Camilla, a love in the shadows after Diana's death. Charles found himself in uncharted territory. He was not only a grieving widower, but also a father carrying the hopes of two sons, and the heir to one of the most scrutinized thrones in the world. Every step, every word, every glance was analyzed, yet beneath all of this, one truth remained: his enduring love for Camilla. Their relationship, once whispered in secrecy, slowly re-emerged, not with a dramatic declaration, but with careful, patient steps. Camilla did not appear as a replacement for Diana. She became a steady presence, a quiet support. Walking beside Charles in a world still haunted by loss, theirs was a love story shaped not by grand gestures, but by survival, by patience. The understanding that time itself would have to heal the wounds of a nation before they could be together openly. And in 2005, after decades of secrecy, Charles and Camilla finally wed. Unlike his first wedding, this was no spectacle, no glittering display of grandeur. Postponed, deliberate, understated. Marriage of love tempered by history, respect, and caution. For some, it was a triumph, proof that love had at last found its place. For others, it was a betrayal, reopening wounds that had never healed. But either way, it marked a turning point. Inside the palace, Charles had finally embraced a new honesty, that love and duty did not have to exist as enemies. The confession that shook the world years later, Charles's confession tore open history's oldest wound. The words "I never truly loved Diana" rattled the world. Headlines exploded. News channels played the clip on endless loops. People debated in kitchens, cafes, and parliaments. Some praised his honesty. Others called it cruelty. But all agreed it had changed the monarchy forever. Crowds once again filled Kensington Palace with candles and flowers, not only in mourning, but in celebration of Diana's enduring legacy. She had become more than royal. She had become immortal. Inside Buckingham Palace, silence reigned. Carefully crafted statements tried to contain the firestorm, but only added fuel to speculation. How would William and Harry respond? Would this revelation destroy what little remained of trust? Could the monarchy survive a king who had laid bare its deepest wound? For William, the burden was unbearable, the heir to the crown carrying the grief of a son. For Harry, the confession reopened scars he had never fully healed. Reigniting his criticism of royal life itself, Diana had once said there were 3 people in her marriage. The world knew she had been right, and in that truth, the monarchy faced its greatest question. Could it survive not through distance and mystique, but through honesty, vulnerability, and transformation? Charles's confession had done more than expose a personal truth. It had revealed the heart of the monarchy itself, fragile, flawed, yet perhaps finally human. Every detail of the occasion had been planned with precision. The palace had rehearsed the lighting, the seating, the timing, yet no amount of preparation could disguise the gravity of the moment. The world wasn't waiting for spectacle. It was waiting for sincerity. Cameras clicked like restless drums, microphones buzzed with anticipation, and millions of eyes across the globe fixed on a single figure. Charles stepped forward, without crown, without robe, without the glittering armor of monarchy. For once, he did not appear as a sovereign cloaked in ritual. He appeared simply as a man burdened by decades of silence, stepping into the light of truth, vulnerable, exposed, human. His voice, though steady, trembled with the weight of unspoken years. "I owe this nation, and above all, my sons, an apology," he began. The words seemed to cut through centuries of polished royal language, words heavy with humility rather than ceremony. For far too long, I carried the truth in silence. I told myself it was for the monarchy. I told myself it was for William and Harry. I told myself it was for me. But in silence, I deepened the pain. I left wounds unhealed, and in doing so, I betrayed not only Diana's memory, but my son's trust. The room fell into absolute stillness. His next words, trembling with raw honesty, pierced deeper. "To William and Harry, I am deeply sorry. You deserved an honest father. You deserved a marriage between your parents built on love, not on duty and expectation. I failed you both. And to the millions who loved Diana, I regret that my silence, my choices, my weakness, caused so much hurt." Each sentence felt like stone. Echoing across the chamber, heavy with sorrow and stripped of royal distance, Charles no longer hid behind titles. He no longer spoke as king. He spoke as a man haunted by regret. Standing at the edge of history with only truth left to offer, he praised Diana's spirit, her courage, her boundless generosity, her ability to shine even under the crushing weight of royalty. She was more than a princess, he admitted. She was the voice of compassion, of honesty, of humanity. My greatest regret, one that will haunt me for all my days, is that I did not give her the peace she deserved. I should have spoken sooner. I should have been braver. I apologize for all that I am. The impact on his sons was immediate and profound. William, ever composed and deliberate, held back public condemnation, choosing instead a measured acknowledgement of painful truths. His silence spoke of restraint, a willingness to let time heal what words could not. Harry, however, raw and unguarded, expressed a torrent of emotion. His disappointment, his anger, and his heartbreak poured out, reopening wounds that had never truly closed. For him, his mother's memory was sacred, and his father's confession felt both honest and cruel, necessary yet unbearable. Across the nation, reactions split like a fault line. Some wept, moved by the image of a king finally stripped of pretense, a monarch willing to reveal human imperfection. Others scoffed bitterly, branding the apology too little too late. Candlelight vigils flickered across the streets. Flowers gathered at memorials once again. Hand-painted banners bore conflicting messages, some of forgiveness, others of accusation. Advisors inside the palace debated endlessly. How much truth could the monarchy withstand? How many cracks could tradition endure before the crown itself fractured? Could transparency strengthen the institution, making it more human, more relatable? Or would exposing the flaws of kings and queens undermine the very mystique that had preserved the monarchy for centuries? The apology could not rewrite history. It could not bring Diana back, nor mend every heart broken in 1997. Yet, it marked a turning point unlike any before. For the first time, the monarchy was not speaking of power, heritage, or divine right. It was speaking of regret, of truth, of love lost. Charles's voice faltered at the close. I cannot change what has been. I cannot erase the pain, but I can speak the truth now. And in doing so, I can hope that Diana's memory will no longer live only in sorrow, but in honesty. That is the least she deserves. And it is the least I can give. The applause was soft, almost reverent, not the jubilant celebration of royal ceremony, but the subdued acknowledgement of a man who had dared to show his humanity. As the room emptied, his words lingered like a haunting echo beyond palace walls. Diana's luminous story, radiant and untouchable, continued to outshine the crown. But Charles, scarred yet courageous in his admission, had changed the monarchy forever. The centuries-old fortress of secrecy had been pierced. The heart, once hidden behind velvet curtains and golden thrones, is now exposed at the very center of power. And so the world was left to wonder, would this moment of truth mark the rebirth of the monarchy? Or would it unravel what generations had fought to preserve?